There was on Saturday 7 Belarusian and Russian players playing at Wimbledon, and there were cheers, applause, even for Medvedev. It was whoops and cheers. Daniil Medvedev, when he was playing on Saturday, the third seed in the men's draw, getting a hell of a response from the Wimbledon crowd. The number 2 seed in the women's game, Anya Sabalenka, even the 16-year-old qualifier, Mira Andreeva, all getting good receptions at Wimbledon. That all changed, though, yesterday when the Ukrainian wildcard, Svitolina, beat Victoria Azarenka 2-6, 6-4, 7-6. And after the match, as it was coming to its conclusion, and then prior to the two players departing court, there was a loads of boos for Azarenka. Afterwards, she spoke about exactly why she thought that was the case.
Well, there's nothing to say. She doesn't want to shake hands with Belarusian people. I respected her decision. I did what should I have done? Stayed and waited? There's no thing that I could do that would have been right. So I just did what I thought was respectful towards her decision. But this conversation about shaking hands is not a life-changing conversation. So if you guys want to keep talking about it, bring it up, make it a big deal, headlines, whatever it is, keep going. I thought it was a great tennis match. And if people are going to be focusing only on handshakes or, quite drunk crowd booing in the end, that's a shame. That's probably what it is in the end of the day.
I think Victoria Azarenka, and you know her very well, was probably a little bit annoyed about the fact that there wasn't that much focus on what was a terrific tennis match. But the reason that this is such a big story is because in tennis, it's very important for you to go and shake your hands with your opponent at the end of a game. It's a massive thing in tennis about tradition. You walk up to the net, you shake hands with your opponent, and you go your separate ways, no matter the hostility. The difference here is that the Belarusian player, Svitolina, has decided over a long period of time, as a Ukrainian, she's not going to shake the hands of a Belarusian or a Russian advocate. This has been going on for a little while now. So Victoria Azarenka knew that was going to be the case.
She did. And I spoke to Victoria. I did a podcast with Victoria a couple of weeks ago, which is coming out this week, and she'll talk in detail about her expectations of Wimbledon and the challenges that she's had as an athlete. She knows full well the background. She's a very respectful and very decent lady, and I know that she's quite upset with what the experience that she had. I think she feels let down by Wimbledon because it was, I think, probably advisable for Wimbledon to remind fans that at the bequest of the Ukrainian players, they didn't want to shake the hands of Belarusian and Russian players. The fact that Victoria hasn't lived in Belarus for 20 years. She lives in America. She has no particular affinity to that country besides the fact it's on her passport. She, a year ago, 18 months ago, when she was banned from Wimbledon, came up with the idea of saying to the All England club, why don't we, if we play, why don't we donate the entire winnings or the proceeds of our tournament fees to the Ukraine War Fund? She's very conversant with the situation. She's got Ukrainian relatives in her family, and she understands the position that these other athletes have taken. Obviously, she watched it in the French Open where it manifested itself and the fans reacted very differently. And what we saw was a remarkable tennis match between two athletes playing at their highest level, with Svitolina operating a level in the third set, which she probably hasn't operated at for some time. And she won a remarkable game. And Victoria went up to the net. She knew the girl didn't want to shake her hand. I'm not quite entirely sure what she could have done. And I sat there and watching, and I'm thinking, what a ridiculous reaction from the fans. The fact that Wimbledon didn't afterwards come out and clarify it. They could have clarified it before the game because it takes the pressure off valued competitors.
Did they speak to Victoria afterwards about the crowd?
They've given her no reaction to the opposite. I mean, listen, she sounds very strong in her interview, but the whole interview was about the handshake and not about the tennis match. She is a very, 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 very decent human being, and I'm not just saying it because I'm fond of her. I'm saying it because I've spent time around people that are sports stars, and she's one of the best people that I've met. She loathes the war. She's spoken out against the war. She's not interested in having. She never asked for a Belarusian flag to be put above her name. She understands the dynamic. She even accepts the parameters of not being able to play in tennis tournaments where the country is represented because she understands that dynamic. Yeah, but the only relationship she has with Belarus is an immutable relationship, which is a passport. And it's the media that have made this into a propaganda political war. And I think it's sad that she gets to walk off a tennis court in a remarkable tennis match and gets booed because she walked up to the net. I watched it. She walked up to the net. She knew this. What's she going to do? Hold her hands out so they can blank her, so we can get even more of a reaction from certain segments of the media. And then she gets a press conference and she's only focused on that. And I know genuinely that she's incredibly upset that was the legacy that she walks away from Wimbledon with, which is a bunch of drunk people booing her.
I'm not sure it's the media's fault for the booing. I think actually it's.
I didn't say it was the media's fault. I said that ultimately the media questions after the interview were not about the tennis match. We're not about this, remarkable performance.
That is absolutely true, but I think that's down to the fact that I actually think the people to blame here are Wimbledon for not announcing beforehand that this is what is going to happen. We all know it's going to happen. They should have done it at the French Open. They got it wrong at the French Open as well, where the reaction from the crowd was completely the reverse, actually.
Absolutely.
Now, here, Wimbledon should have come out and they should have said, look, this is a Ukrainian player who has refused and doesn't want to, and maybe understandably, it's up to you. You can decide what you want for yourself. But this is the situation. So,
but it's a backdrop to the Wimbledon banning Russian and Belarusian athletes' passports. Really was what they're banning a year ago, where all the other Grand Slams did not, and so the legacy hangs over. And I do think it's really unfair because, a lot
of sports have banned Russian sports teams from taking part, but this is an individual.
Sports teams are very different. I'm in the camp, and I think so is Victoria, that it's fully understood and accepted that if you're representing your country and you wish to be representing your country, then there is a debate to be had about, given the nature of propaganda wars, and I'm not in this camp. I don't believe that Putin can leverage sports stars in the same way that in 1936 Hitler could do that, because we've got a whole different world of communication where propaganda can't be fulfilled the way it once was. But let's just say, from a point of view of understanding the dynamics, understanding this hideous war in this country and this illegal war that's been waged upon people, it's much more complicated than just the dynamics of what people think it is. But let's not get into a political debate about it. Let's accept that actually athletes competing under a flag that's in line with the Russian regime don't compete at the Olympics, and we all accept that. Individuals that are not representing their country, the only qualification for Victoria to play at Wimbledon was the fact she was a talented tennis player. And ultimately, the fact that the fans booed shows their ignorance and stupidity, because what they should have been doing was applauding the fact that two tennis players played a remarkable match. Svitolina played with remarkable motivation in the third set. Victoria could and should have won it. It was on her racket to win. And I feel sorry for her. And I think that she's been a great champion in the Australian Open. She's been a great tennis player. I think she conducted herself throughout the whole of that match, where there was a lot of support for the other girl in a very dignified way. And for her overriding feelings to be as upset as I think she may well be is disappointing. And I think the fans should have done better. But more importantly, I think you're absolutely right. I think Wimbledon, that wanted it this way and allowed it to be this way, and in the same way that the French did, had a duty of care to its valued seeded players, or to anybody, to turn around and say, so that the audience are aware, reminding you of the preference of the Ukrainian athletes, which is their prerogative, that they're not going to be shaking hands. And Victoria did not want to snub her on any shape or form, and wouldn't have done it.
Interesting to see if Wimbledon actually get this right for later in the draw, because there is every possibility if Svitolina manages to continue, although she does have her next match in the quarterfinals, in the fourth round against Swiatek, which is going to be very tricky, or quarterfinals against Swiatek, which is going to be incredibly tricky. She's the number one seed. But Andreeva, Alexandrova and Sabalenka are all on the other side of the draw.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.